If you would genuinely believe that suffering is optional in your life, would you still choose to suffer? Pain is normal, suffering is optional. Pain is mandatory. Whenever you push yourself, whenever you do something which forces you to grow, and that could be physical pain, physiological pain, like you feel it in your body when you go to the gym, and you are familiar with it. If you want to grow muscle, you have to break, the current tissue that you have, the current muscle tissue, in order to grow stronger tissue. So we are familiar with the typical physical pain in the growth process, but we don't map that with our psychological growth. I'm talking a lot about becoming someone else, right? Transforming your life, growing, personal development, personal growth. But what is it? What does it mean to grow? Of course, you see today in this video more or less the same person you saw maybe 1 year ago. I look more or less the same. Sometimes I have longer beard, sometimes, smaller one. My hair maybe is changing, but you cannot see really the growth that I am feeling internally. That's psychological growth, right? It's not physical growth. I look more or less the same like I looked 1 year ago. But when it comes down to my own perception of my own psychological growth, which you cannot really see in a tangible way visually, but you might feel it, that psychological growth, it's the most important thing. Because what you believe here, what you think about here, will ultimately derive the kind of growth that you are experiencing on all planes, right? Physical and psychological. So the theme of this video is indeed pain versus suffering. And I want to make the case that pain is not only necessary, but it's something that you should seek consciously. Because if pain is inevitable and it's important in order for you to grow and evolve, why not choose it willingly also when it comes down to psychological pain, right? Discomfort. And here the distinction is clear, right? Pain is something that you are willing to go through and you can tolerate and you can choose consciously. Suffering is something that you typically don't choose for yourself. Suffering is an undesirable consequence of your unconscious thoughts, and let's call them limiting beliefs. You suffer because you are not in full alignment with the challenge that you are being confronted with. You are suffering because you want a different reality. You're suffering because you expected things to be different based on how you projected them. You're suffering because you are anticipating a future outcome that is undesirable to you. You're suffering because you are not in full ownership of this moment of your life. Life, as we've discussed about several times, happens only in this moment. Life is this moment. Life never happens outside this moment. However, that moment presents itself. For me, this moment presents itself being in front of this camera. My kids are sleeping, my family, is sleeping. I am here in front of this camera. And this is it. This is my life. This is how this moment presents itself. And for me, this moment is precious. It's not something that I'm just doing before the kids wake up, so then I can do something more important or more interesting. I'm fully here. And I cherish this time. It's as important for me as any other time. Of course, it might sound forced, and to a point it is, right? I don't want to convince you that washing dishes should be as important as spending precious time with your loved ones, because I would be a hypocrite. At the same time, if I would say that wholeheartedly, that would just be me being some sort of an enlightened person, because ultimately that should be our reality, ideally. Because if it's not, the more we depart from that kind of reality, the more we implicitly balance the suffering balance in our not in our favor, because we are implicitly saying that this is not important, something else is important, something else that I'm not doing now, something else that happens in the future. So whenever we do that, that kind of thinking implies suffering, because you cannot embrace fully how that life, that moment presents itself in your life. And as we know, life is full of seemingly trivial and not very important and interesting moments. But at the same time, that moment, as it presents itself, is the fullness of life for you in that moment, right? Because you can only have that moment. Whenever you start projecting, it's your mind taking ownership of how things should be instead. And whenever you are thinking about something in the future, in the so-called future, you are departing from this moment in which life happens. Now, let's be a bit more pragmatic here, right? Because I tend to get a bit philosophical, but there is a lot of pragmatism and logic behind what I'm saying, which has downstream consequences in how I'm actually living my life and what I'm getting out of this kind of thinking. We are all very familiar with people discounting the value of what they are living today and this month, this year, for some sort of incredible win that they might have in the future. Some, long-term project, some financial goal that they aspire to get to, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years from now. And they put their happiness on hold for that thing in the future to save them and to make it worth them ruining or wasting basically a few years of their life. And that might sound like a good trade-off. We are so used to sacrificing things for a future gain that we don't even think about it not being a normal thing, not being a natural thing. And let's take this simple thought exercise. Let's imagine you have two people, one of them already successful and with all the kind of comfort that you can imagine that someone would need. However, they are not happy with what they have, and they have this amazing goal. They want to have, they want to make huge amounts of money in 2 years, and it's something that forces them to discount everything based on this goal, right? Whatever they are living now, it's an obstacle for them to reach that point. They are sacrificing their life. They are working 16 hours a day. They are pushing through hardship, and they are doing a lot of stuff so that they can get to this outcome. And on the other hand, you have someone who is deeply satisfied with their day-to-day. However, they are not having a glamorous vision. They don't have some sort of goal that would inspire the society, you know, when it doesn't make for a nice story as such. And they're more in tune with what they are doing on a day-to-day basis. And I have a very vivid example for you, to represent this kind of person, the second type of person. There is one lady here, nearby, who is facilitating people, like kids typically, to cross the street. So whenever there is a car and she sees a child wanting to cross the street, she's like coming and places her hand in front of the car so they can stop. You know, the car should stop to facilitate somehow the crossing of that child or people who want to cross the street. I think she's nearby a school or something, and she's employed maybe by the commune, by the city council or something like this. She must be very low paid, I can imagine, because just sitting at the crossing and doing basically what looks like a useless job, because it's a crossing, it's something that it's already signaled, so I would anyway stop, but she somehow is there to facilitate these crossings. And I always wonder, how can someone do that kind of work, right? Because she's staying there typically in the morning, right, between, I don't know, 7 to 10, 7 to 9, something like this, a few hours, when there is this kind of transit. And no matter the weather, she's always there. And what's impressive, to me at least, is that she's not angry, she's not mad. She's actually very happy with the activity that she's doing. It seems very purposeful for her. Because whenever there is someone who wants to cross the street, she takes it very seriously. She's not just standing there and, you know, hoping that I will stop the car. No, she actively, you know, puts herself in front of my car, and she makes a sign to stop and so on. And then she's very kind and she smiles, and she's happy that she was able to facilitate the crossing of someone, the street, which sounds so bizarre for me when I'm thinking about me doing this kind of things. And I see her since, I think, a couple of years already. And her enthusiasm for this job first intrigued me a lot. But with time and seeing the same kind of persistence, the same kind of dedication, it appears clearly to me that this is not a fake kind of activity. This is not, she's not pretending to like what she's doing. She's actively enjoying this job, right? Which might be some sort of part-time job, I don't know, but she's definitely into it. And this contrast between her being excited about this job and me imagining in how much pain I would be if I would have to do it intrigues me hugely. And at the same time, I grew an immense respect for her, for actually doing this wholeheartedly. Even if for me it seems like an unnecessary job and something that I would not do even for a huge amount of money. It seems so trivial, and for my mind, I think it just cannot bear the fact that I would have to stay there for apparently no reason. But she's doing it with such huge determination that it's really something I grew up to appreciate a lot. It fascinates me. Fascinates me to the point of thinking about her whenever I'm thinking about someone doing his job in a very nice way, in a good way. And it's it's fascinating now that I'm thinking about it, because you would expect, or I would expect of myself, to think about some sort of, perfect human being, like an incredible role model, doing something very complicated and very complex that I should be impressed of, right? They are spending, they spent 30 years of their life to become, very good at this craft, and now look at what they're doing. And of course, I'm impressed by that kind of ability as well. But this lady, who is seemingly doing nothing really, she's the kind of model that I have in mind when I think about someone who takes their job seriously and do it wholeheartedly, facilitating a child's crossing of the street. And let's go back to our example, right? That person who is already, let's say, rich even, and they want to have this kind of incredible financial outcome 2 years from now, and they discard everything around them in pursuit of that goal. And this lady, or someone like her, who takes their job very seriously, who finds joy and purpose in seemingly useless kind of daily activities. And let's take these two type of people, right? And let's assume they have 1 month more to live. And they would be informed about their impending death in the last day of this month. They would be told, unfortunately, this is your last day. Who do you think between these two would have the biggest regrets based on how they've spent the last month of their life? If they knew that today is their last day, who would spend the remaining time of that day with more regrets? The person who basically doesn't even remember what he did maybe in the past month because of this incredible, drive and pursuit to do whatever it takes so they get to this outcome in the future? Or someone like this lady that I talked about, who enjoys deeply the day-to-day activity and finds purpose and fulfillment from that job? Who has more regrets? No one takes anything with them from tomorrow, right? Because they would be dead. I think when life hits you with that kind of, let's say, imminency, with that kind of immediacy, you are forced into recognizing what's actually important. When you know really that the way you came into this world is the same way you leave this world, with literally nothing, what would you start to prioritize? What would you care more about? How intuitive is what I'm thinking, and at the same time, how easy it is to discard the importance of what I'm saying. Think about this. Contemplate. Nothing is missing. This moment, as trivial and as seemingly not important as it might look, is all there is. And if you are not happy now, and if you cannot create the context in your life to be happy in a seemingly trivial and non-important moment like this, what makes you think that you will be able to do it in the future? And if you can do it in the future, what are you doing instead? Why are you living life on a basis which doesn't facilitate you being happy and fulfilled in this moment? the most important thing in life is to minimize future regrets, which are current regrets because the future doesn't exist. So when you think about regrets that you might have now, they are the manifested regrets of your past self in a way, right? Because in the past, you didn't do the things that would have placed you in a position not to have these regrets. And this will also happen in the so-called future. What you are avoiding today is piling up regret for your future self to deal with. You are creating unnecessary suffering for a person that you will inevitably meet in the future, for whom you should otherwise care enough to not put them in that position. You should do today whatever it takes to gladly accept the pain of your growth and your transformation, as you do it for your physical body, do it for your psychological mind, right? Do it for the future self, do it for your future self, who wants the best of you, who is someone that you will grow into, someone that you will meet. Why not make that person's life better? That's the only goal that is worth pursuing in a way. Because that's something that is ultimately your destiny, right? And the destiny is something that you are building for yourself, day by day, choice by choice. There's no magic there. Happy exploration.